Hey there, fellow creators, Ben here from Cinder Studios, and this week we're talking about glass palettes, how to make one and why you should use one. Stick around. So there's a lot of options out there for artists for the traditional palette, what to mix your paint on. Most traditionally is a simple wood palette with a thumb through like I just showed you. This can be a really nice, simple, affordable option, but a lot of wood palettes aren't sealed or anything like that, so the paint slowly absorbs into them. If you're using acrylics, over time that paint really just builds up on that surface, making it pretty much impossible to use. Good example of that is this. This doesn't have the thumb hole. I don't think it was ever actually designed to be a palette, but it kind of had that shape. I used this for years, and now it's hanging in the studio as a memento of all of the paintings that I used to make it. Another option you'll probably see is plastic palettes. A lot of times you'll see plastic palettes, especially for things like watercolor. They're a decent option. They tend to rinse clean pretty easily, but if you let your paint dry on a plastic palette, that's kind of the end of it. There's also a number of just simple disposable options. There's palette paper that you can buy in pads, which is essentially just a padded version of wax paper that you can get at the grocery store. A lot of people will use paper plates. I'll grab them from time to time on larger projects and murals, stuff like that. More heavier duty plastic plates are also really, really useful. Again, I've used these in the past before, but they're one, maybe two uses, and then you have to just throw them away, which is kind of wasteful. Plus, in terms of paper and plastic plates, you're looking at things that maybe are a little bit flimsier and don't hold up quite as well. Has this ever happened to you? Weak palettes, spilling paints, there's got to be a better way. Well, now there is with the glass palette. So the only option really after all of those is glass. So why would anyone choose to use a glass palette? Because glass is fragile and breakable. Glass palettes are infinitely reusable. If you let the paint dry on them, you can spray a little water on it and scrape it clean. If you're using oils on glass palette, I've heard actually recently that you can use rubbing alcohol as that loosening agent and it scrapes off a little easier. If you still have a relatively wet paint on your palette, you can just take it to the sink and rinse it off nice and easily. Despite not having a thumb hole through it, there's still, because it's a nice thin, rigid sheet, it's very easy to just pick up and hold. Because glass is cuttable to some degree, we'll get to that in a minute, you can make infinitely different sizes of these. In addition to my sort of regular size palettes, I have some really tiny mini ones, some shorter, fatter, smaller ones, some long ones. I love these. And even one really, really big one, although the bigger you go, the more likely it is you're probably going to break it. And of course, regardless of what painting medium you use, you can use it on the glass palette. Watercolors, oils, acrylics, literally any kind of paint. I did my casein demos a couple of last year. That's all on the glass palettes. There is no limitation because of the lack of absorbency of glass that will prevent you from using any kind of painting medium with it. So despite the only con of glass being it might break, it is literally the single most versatile, infinitely reusable, eco-friendly option for artists imaginable when it comes to choosing a palette. So all that said, let me show you guys how I make these. So first things first, how do you get a pane of glass in the first place? It's not like they're just sitting around and you can't necessarily use an old window because it's framed in, and getting glass out of a window is tricky and dangerous. The biggest and easiest way to usually find glass though is going to be in picture frames, old ones. I'm not using this one, this is a nice frame. Hit Goodwill, the thrift store, go to garage sales, yard sales, rummage sales, any place you can get anything secondhand. Old picture frames are perfect for this. Depending on where you live and what's around you, if you don't have any of those kind of things going on, look for scraps and surplus from construction sites and building building material locations. If you ask around and be like, hey, do you have any just pieces of glass, scraps? They don't necessarily have to be, perfect squares. They can be pieces or whatever, as long as you're careful. Wear gloves if you're transporting stuff back and forth. But yeah, just get your hands on a simple piece of soda lime glass that you can score and cut and make the size that you need. So when it comes to cutting the surface, you're going to probably want one of these. This is a simple little glass cutter. You can find these pretty much anywhere that sells hardware supplies. It's a remarkably simple and easy to use tool with a little bit of practice. So I'm going to start by making sure that your glass is clean. Give yourself some measurements, see how big of a piece you want. Now when it comes to using the glass scorer, you want to push down just enough that you are scratching the surface of that glass. If you push too hard, the glass is going to break right in half, and usually not in a straight line. So you're just kind of scoring the top of that. Now this is totally optional. I honestly don't know if it actually helps, but I've noticed it makes my breaks a little cleaner and easier 9 times out of 10, where I take that little ball at the back and just lightly tap across the glass to hopefully make sure that that's going to break nice and evenly. Then bring that piece of glass to the edge of a table or work surface. Again, make sure there's no bumps or anything, otherwise that glass is going to break in a weird pattern. I also put a piece of plastic down on the floor because you might not see any particles drop, but chances are there's going to be a little small fragments of glass and you don't necessarily want to step on those, so it's good to throw down that as a precaution. Then when you're ready, just simply snap that piece right off. If you're really paranoid about glass shards cutting your hands, again, wear yourself a pair of gloves. It should help considerably. And it might take you a couple of tries to really get a good clean cut and get your nice technique down going for yourself. But once you kind of have that figured out, cutting glass is super easy. So the final step then is to simply tape the edges. Now there's a lot of different options for tape. A lot of people have different preferences. This one is just using some blue painter's tape. You can use duct tape. Artist tape works just fine. You're really just trying to keep those edges from being able to cut your hand when you pick it up. You need to have something secure. You're not worried about slicing your hand open. It also helps protect the glass a little bit in terms of if it does break, it's usually going to hold together on the edges, so disposing it if need be is going to be a little easier. Now with all the options for tape out there, the one that I actually go to 9 times out of 10 though is electrical tape. Electrical tape has a certain property which I find to be remarkably useful for glass palettes, and that is that it is a plasticky sort of vinyl tape that when you apply it, it's not only sticks to the glass a lot better than a lot of the other options out there, especially the masking tape side of things, but the nature of it being a little bit thicker of a tape is going to help protect the edges of that glass. And when you fold around those corners, it gives that extra layer of protection for your hands and just holds up a lot better. I've used other tapes on other palettes and either they end up scraping off or chipping or coming loose eventually. I have decades old palettes with the electrical tape and they haven't budged. This particular roll is a little bit thinner than I personally would normally go for, but that happens to be what I have in the studio right now. So we're just applying that down. It sticks real nicely. Fold it over and round out the edges. And you just do that for all the sides. So that's all it takes to make a simple glass palette. Now a lot of people will also take another step to this where they will spray paint the back or front or whatever side of this either white or gray. This is to help with color mixing, and be like, I can't really see what colors they are, especially if they're over a surface that maybe has all these other different colors. Personally, I don't really have that problem, but I can understand why it might make a difference for certain people. Now, a simple solution to this without spray painting the back of this, because one, if I'm using a glass palette, I like the ability to use either side of it or even just flip it over as I'm working. But if you just grab yourself a sheet of paper and put that underneath your palette, well, you have solved the problem of not having to spray the back and, you know, make this less usable, but also still give yourself an accurate understanding of color mixing. So that's how I make my little glass palettes and all the benefits to actually using one. I think they're a really fantastic option for artists, and given the various sizes that you can customize these into, I think they're one of the most invaluable tools that any artist can have. So what about you guys? Are you a wood palette purist, a plastic palette painter, or a glass palette professional? Whatever you use, let me know in comments below and why you choose that particular palette style. Whatever type of palette you choose, remember that if you're struggling in any capacity with where you're mixing your paint, maybe it's time to upgrade to something else. I hope this look at how I create my glass palettes, as well as all the benefits of them, get you to try one for yourself if you never have before. As always, be sure to subscribe for more videos like this. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps things out. Keep on creating, and this has been for Cinder Studios, and I will see you guys next time. But what about you guys? Are you more of a wood palette purist, a plastic palette? Oh, this would be a good alliteration. Plastic palette painter.